What's up everyone, welcome to today's video, welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. Now, another ability that we really have to come and take into consideration is Jason's sidearms. During the presentation, Jeff Eleanor, the game director, mentioned that Jason used rounds, but they were non-lethal and they dealt a lot of damage. I think this has become a point of contention in an interesting way. So let's look first in the story where Jason is right now. Jason seems to have come through his Lazarus Pit phase and is probably more on friendly terms with Batman as say compared to Under the Red Hood, or even compared to say the middle or beginning of Batman Arkham Knight. If you want to use any universe, even though this is not an Arkham game, we get it, but still at some point you have to follow the entire guidance of the canon, which is Jason is thought to be dead and then he's no longer dead, has some sort of a vendetta against Batman for seemingly abandoning him and then potentially eventually mending that relationship, right? So this is just the baseline of that canonical fact. Now, you put that in perspective and say perhaps Batman prohibits him from using any lethal rounds because he's trying to come back into the family and the family has the policy of, in quote, not killing anyone, even though we saw one of the bad guys fall off the roof and we wondered, whoa, what's going on? I guess you have to say to yourself, are we going to put Jason in this place where we have to give him these two sidearms when we can actually give him potentially other options that we've seen him fight with? Now, it may seem jarring that potentially he can use a knife, which is one of his tools that he uses to fight, or he could basically just use his hands for melee. He's actually that good at his craft in terms of being a martial artist and an acrobat. And so I think this leaves the question, because if you actually want to go back and say, okay, well, he's using these non-lethal rounds, but at the end of the day, how does this actually tie or play into his own abilities? Now, I don't know how the developers plan on answering that question, but it appears to me that shooting a bunch of duds or, somewhat marshmallows, because if these are rounds that deal a lot of damage, I see some of the enemies basically hardly getting stunned by them, or I don't necessarily see a lot of impact from the gameplay. Maybe there's more to be revealed. Maybe you can enhance the power of these non-lethal rounds later in the course of the game. But the question still needs to be answered. How are these rounds going to tie into his fighting style? These are a lot of things that have to be answered from a story perspective into the gameplay. It's not going to be easy or free for us to be able to kind of wrap our minds around this without any context. And I think this is a question that a lot of people are asking within the community. But it's quite curious that as this entire gameplay sequence was showcased, the question and even the throwback to the Red Hood depiction in Arkham Knight basically has resurfaced. While perusing the Twitters, I saw a clip that was actually posted by Evan Filarka, and in that clip, it showed some sort of a comparison between the Red Hood gameplay fight sequences in Arkham Knight and what we got to see at the Gotham Knights reveal. This was very interesting. I think the reason this was probably clipped together was to show perhaps the flow in gameplay and combat, and this was possibly why somebody went ahead and clipped these two things together. But here in this video, I don't necessarily want to emphasize those things. What I want to emphasize and keep our focus on is the lethal nature of how Jason interacts in both games. And keep in mind, I know Gotham Knights is not an Arkham game. I know. But at least in Batman Arkham Knight, one of the things that we knew was Jason was not yet in a place where he was using these non-lethal rounds, and he basically lit up enemy NPCs. Now, one thing that you could also say is if you walk around just lighting everybody up, you become overpowered, right? And that's actually true. You just basically point your gun to an enemy and you shoot them and they're basically toast. But here's something within the mechanics of Arkham Knights that the developers were quick to pretty much help allow for the game to feel fair and balanced. And that is when Jason was in the animation shooting an enemy NPC, he was pretty much locked into that animation and it was very frame intensive. There were a lot of frames for the action because he actually shot the enemy multiple times. And in this vein, he was open for attacks from other enemy NPCs who could break the action or at least stop your combo if you were building some sort of a combo meter. If you were playing stealth and you did that, it alerted other enemy NPCs as to your location as well. So this was able to put some realistic perspective on how a weapon would probably work in the hands of someone like Jason. Nonetheless, even if you didn't want to use any of those projectile capabilities, he still had a lot of fluid fighting mechanics that allowed for him to still be a very lethal weapon just as a character, as a martial artist, and as an acrobat. I wonder how this is going to play out in Gotham Knights, because this has people racking our minds. One thing about gameplay mechanics, and I'm sure the developers were doing this just to respond to the amount of demand that people had for Nightwing and Red Hood, and that was just the truth. They were two of the most requested, knights that people wanted to see, and the developers thought to deliver this. I'm hoping that as time goes on, we start to get a frame in terms of context. We start to get a frame of reference as to how Jason is interacting with these particular mechanics and why the developers have decided, or why the story or canon demands that this actually be the case in Gotham Knights. Another thing too is the animation in terms of hit reactions. This is something that might not necessarily be a big deal for now, but I think it really does add a very interesting perspective to combat in many games. If you notice, hit reactions in many different games allow for you as the player to understand that aspect of either failure or that aspect of you being on the back foot. Regarding Gotham Knights, nonetheless, I noticed that when Jason or Red Hood gets hit, he doesn't necessarily stagger or react with a variation of animations, nor does the hit reaction from him feel authentic in a sense. And I know probably if I were to compare this game to Arkham Knight, I'll probably hear the game is not an Arkham game. But nonetheless, there are other video games out there who also do hit reactions, and as seen in these different clips, hit reactions seem to be something that you as the player can somewhat feel. If you get hit by an enemy, you know that there's something that has happened to your player. It breaks all of your input. It takes a little bit of time, perhaps maybe 1.5 seconds, or sometimes even more than that, just to make you know that there are different hits that you as a player have experienced. In fact, something that's even in a sense missing, or in our minds anyways, for those of us who played the Arkham games extensively, is that feeling of dizziness, or that kind of an interesting distorted vision that you get. The entire screen is kind of in a sense distorted, and you're probably trying to gather your stance and your stamina back, and the game kind of allows for you to feel that. It doesn't seem like that's a mechanic that was depicted in this gameplay reveal, and again, like I said, I'm hoping that this build probably didn't have it in place, and the developers already have something in line for us to be able to see that. And so industry standard has already been set. It's kind of a shame that, many people are probably pointing out these things, and it may seem like they're weighing too heavily against the game, but it is not necessarily to condemn the game. It is to have the developers see areas where the game can improve. At least this is my own motivation nonetheless. I guess maybe I should speak for myself and for some of the people in our core community, because we all want this game to do very well. In fact, some people have started to pre-order the game. Even though they have their doubts, even though they have their reservations, they're still trying to show support. Myself, I don't know if I'll be pre-ordering the game, but I am quite confident that the game is going to be of quality nonetheless. And even whatever, I still want to play the game, and I want to experience it for myself, because I feel like there are other things that are much more than these other categories of, little things that we're pointing out, that I might be able to glean and enjoy from the game overall. But I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Talk to me about the reactions, talk to me about the bullets and some of those little things like, bullet damage, and how that's going to be implemented in this Gotham Knights game. Thank you so much for watching the video. Hopefully we'll talk very soon. Peace out.
Mission complete.